That's an order that's made under Section 207 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. And I'm appointed by ministers to report in relation to the stopping up order and a series of objections, 5 outstanding objections, into the order that proceeded following the grant of a planning permission on appeal by fellow reporter Claire Milne last year into the planning application by Mr. and Mrs. Coburn. Mrs. Coburn is present at the call this morning. This call is a live call for those who are attending here, and I'll just double check in a minute, as I say, who's all on the call. But for the purposes of data protection and GDPR, participation in this call is being taken as consent to the images being recorded and retained on the DPE website for data protection purposes. The hearing is a follow-up to a series of other documents that are available on the DPE website in relation to the matters that are before me. All relevant documents are published in accordance with the curriculum publication policy. And just for the record, the case reference number on the DPA website is SUO-140-001 for anybody who may be watching this separately or later who wishes to access the documents and see the documents that are available. As I say, I've circulated an agenda, which I'll speak a bit about in a minute. And I'll say, I think primarily for the planning permission holder's benefit, the nature of a hearing is not like a full public inquiry when there's kind of examination and cross-examination and the like. It's a process whereby we go through the agenda, led by me, and the questions all formally go through me as the chair of the meeting. But I'm always quite relaxed about the way in which we do these things. So if people want to ask questions, just say or raise your hand, and we can work through that. But formally, things go through me for identifying relevant issues ahead of me and reporting to ministers on the matters that are outstanding. I should say in that respect, although this is a fairly formal process, even if it's not a full public inquiry, I do try to make this as relaxed and as informal as possible. So it should try to be relaxed and not treat it with undue formality. If anything that is happening in the course of this call is unclear, or anybody is made to feel uncomfortable about any aspect of the hearing this morning, just shout and feel comfortable to speak up to be doing that. Any questions as we go. I always ask people to be polite and respectful to each other in these circumstances as well. That helps me understand the issues far better if we'll listen to the views expressed by others and we'll work through the agenda just as we go through that. As I say, by going through people's comments individually, there shouldn't be any need, I hope, to be raising hands or interrupting, but if I'm going too fast or missing important points that you want to make, then feel free to do so. I'm not entirely sure how long the meeting is likely to last, given the number of attendees. We take as long as we need. I was going to say we'll take a break at 11:30. Whether we actually get to 11:30 or not is perhaps we'll see. But on virtual meetings like this, it's always quite helpful to have more frequent breaks than perhaps otherwise. If we do go through that time, and if other attendees attend and we go through and sit until 1 o'clock and take a break, then that may be unlikely. If anybody, however, does want a break at any other time for any reason, then just shout and we can accommodate that. My intention, and I address this mainly to Mr. Kirk, I suspect, is that it's not my intention to request closing submissions, certainly not at the end of today's hearing. I suspect the circumstances are such there's probably not going to be a need for closing submissions at all, but just for Mr. Kirk's peace of mind, I'll not be asking him to be summarising his case by way of a closing submission at the end of today. So with that by way of general introductions, I'll maybe just go around the room and start. I think we've formally got 2 representatives of the council, if they could introduce themselves and explain their respective roles for the purpose of this hearing.
Yeah, well, I'll start. I'm Ron Kerr. I'm a managing solicitor of the Property and Licensing Group within the wider legal team at Third Borders Council. My role primarily, as I said, I've been involved with my colleague Mr. Ingalls and in this process following the granting of the planning permission for the development at the locus. So that's really been my involvement as the solicitor for SBC.
My name's Derek Ingalls. I'm the lead roads planning officer at Scottish Borders Council. My team are responsible for managing the impact of new development on the road network. We're also responsible for the upkeep of the list of public roads. I've have over 40 years experience in roads planning, and my involvement in this site has been a consultation response through the planning process and as well as responding as required for the stopping up process.
Thank you. And I've noted that the response to the objections was one collective letter, I think, that was written by you, Mr. Ingalls, that we can work through when we get through the other parts of the agenda as we go through. I'm taking it that you're a roads official rather than a planning official. I know there's a crossover and some of the objections relate to the crossover between the two, but I'm taking it from how you described your experience and the responses you made that you're primarily a kind of roads. Are you a roads engineer, or you just got a roads background rather than planning?
Yeah, I'm a roads engineer, so we deal with road construction consent applications as well. But we work part of the planning team, if you like, and we work very closely with our colleagues in planning.
Okay, that's all fine. And Mr. Coburn, do you want to introduce yourself and say something about your interest in this? I think I know what it is, but just for the record.
Yeah, my name's Caroline Coburn. I'm the occupier of 19 Birks 2, and I'm just going ahead with the stopping up order after the application grant was successful.
That's fine, thank you. I may have just ask you a couple of questions as we go through the hearing just to help my understanding of the background of the planning process, but that's very helpful for as we have general introductions, and I'm not seeing anybody else having joined the call since we've been going through all of that. As I say, I've circulated an agenda of a number of items that I intend to work through, really in conjunction with Mr. Ingalls' note and with the various letters of objection. I take it nobody's intimated any suggested changes to the agenda, and I take it we're all content to work through that in the course of this morning. I've given the objectors the opportunity to expand upon their objections and turn them into some more formal statement of case or rely on their letters of objection. And on the whole, they've relied on letters of objection. But Reverend Hemley and Mr. Stoddart did submit some photographs with a kind of explanatory covering email, which are on the DPA case management system. They've been uploaded there. So that's the information I have for that. So on the basis of the agenda circulated, the first thing you've done the kind of introductions. The first set of questions I want to ask just for my own contextual understanding of it from Mr. Kirk is just to confirm. My understanding is that the bits of the parking spaces that are the subject of this order are part of the adopted road, and the Scottish Borders Council are the local roads authority. But the areas concerned I think are adopted roads as they stand just at present.
That is correct. That's certainly my understanding.
Yeah. And in terms of the process, I think you've given indications of the rights and interests of statutory undertakers, and none of whom appear to have any interest or any apparatus or equipment in the area under or next to the road concerned, is my understanding from the various papers. Was notice given to the statutory undertakers formally, or did you know that there was no interest there?
No. We did intimate to the statutory undertakers, but no responses were received.
That's fine. And in terms of the sort of process for the stopping up order, I think it's the case. My assumption is the case that when looking at identifying any potential objectors, and obviously there were 6 now reduced to 5, there was a site notice that was put up in relation to stopping up order. That would be the norm. I presume that
That was correct. My understanding that's a requirement under paragraph 5 of Schedule 16 to the Act, as well as you moved on to this the publication in a newspaper circulating in the area. So it was advertised in the Southern Reporter, which is a newspaper which circulates weekly in the area, and also as required by Schedule 16 in the Edinburgh Gazette as well. And both of those adverts run, I think they were on the same day, which is 6th of September 2024.
Yes, and the Council have lodged copies of those documents, so they're with me. I've seen them, so I'm satisfied certainly in terms of the public advertisement of all of that. So that's helpful. Thank you for confirming all of that. The next thing on my agenda, which I suspect is probably only if it's occurred, but Mrs. Coburn can contribute if she wants to, is that the question of what is the legal text in section 207 is something that I was aware of was considered by an English High Court case, the Network Rail infrastructure case, which I've put on the case management system and I've given the reference to there. The main paragraphs of that, there's a couple of rogue paragraph references there. The main paragraphs are references, paragraph 25 and 32, and they dealt with a couple of aspects of the proper test. I think, as I've said in correspondence, the purpose of our roads stopping up order is not to reconsider the merits of the planning consent. That's been dealt with by Reporter Milne in her report. And so there's not a backdoor way in which to relitigate the merits of the planning consent, but the test is necessity. And in that Network Rail case, particularly at paragraph 25, there's an indication that necessity doesn't mean absolutely essential, but merely means that it's required in all the circumstances applicable in the circumstances there, but that the reporter, like me, who has to examine this, had to look at this afresh, as in not as a rehearing of the planning merits, but consider all the factors in play. At the paragraph 25 there, that was a lower court and made findings there, but in the Network Rail case, that was endorsed by the High Court later on in the decision. So that was the context in which I was intending to proceed today, but I'll really invite Mr. Kirk to make any representations he wishes to make about the relevance or otherwise of matters in that Network Rail case.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think the only thing that I would really say about that is that I did know that paragraph 24, there was reference to the inspector, the inspector comment, I think, which he made at paragraph 20 of his judgment, where he makes reference to the fact that the part in question lies largely or totally out with the development site. And of course, the difference here is that the parking bays lie within the development site, or at least part of the development site. So I think my submission would be that because the parking bays lie within the development site, then there is a necessity that the parking bays be stopped up because they are currently adopted in terms of the road network. So that would be the only comment I would have to make about that.
Well, that's helpful. And for Mrs. Coburn, my understanding is that all the land concerned is essentially owned by you, although the parking bays were put on it. It's one of the kind of quirks of roads law, which Mr. Ingold will know about, is that the owners of the adjacent land normally own the underlying, or the solum of the road, even if it's built on and adopted as a road. So my understanding, Mrs. Coburn, is that the whole of the land concerned is indeed in the ownership of you and your husband.
It is, yes.
Yeah. If there's anything you want to say about that particular case, I'll bring in Mr. Ingold in a second. But is there anything else you wanted to say about that case? It's a pretty impenetrable case, I have to say. You've done well if you've read it and understood it.
I've not read that, to be honest. I don't fully understand what you're talking about, to be honest.
That's fair enough.
As I'm concerned about the land, in good faith, that it was land that we could use. There was never any talk about not being able to use the land, because the only reason we bought it was to be part of the garden. we went through solicitors for 1 to 2 years, and we were guaranteed that the parking bay, there was no even talk of a stop up. We didn't even know what that was when it got adopted. We didn't even know what that meant. So we thought it would be at the time that it would be part of our garden. The only time that we came across it was after we put a fence around it that came to light. So we spent a lot of money on the fence, and then we got told we had to take it down, and then we've been 2-3 years to go through this process to try and reclaim it, basically. Yeah.
That's very useful. I think some of that stuff around the fences I've seen in some of the photographs that are there, but that's very useful. Just the kind of general background of that. So, Mr. Ingalls. Yeah, I saw a beat just now.
That's on mute. Another difference, yeah, everybody does it. In terms of the Network Rail one, there was a planning condition specifically relating to the stopping up and so on, whereas there's no planning condition for this one. Mrs. Coburn has just been made aware that in order to take up the planning consent, that road would have to be stopped up, so that the land would then revert to her and it would no longer be a public road, and then she could take up the planning consent. So it's a bit different in that respect as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. The English case is slightly quirky. It's kind of it's like the current circumstances, but the other way around. Not only the point made about land ownership, but the fact that it was an addition to a planning consent that would only be permitted if the road was stopped up. So it gave rise to kind of additional complications that don't really arise. I think it seems to me don't arise in the current circumstances.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful. Thank you for that. In the agenda, I identified a number of concerns that I'd classed in sort of items 4 to 7. And without the objectors here, it's kind of hard to go through each of those. I'm conscious, Mr. Ingalls, that you really dealt with these in your response, that we went to each of the parties concerned. There were concerns about vehicle charging. I should just remind people that I had a very pleasant day in the sun. I'm down to see we're coming down to Galashiels at the beginning of July. The sun definitely shone, and I was able to have a good look at the site and took photographs for my own benefit. And it certainly didn't seem to me. I saw the other spaces that were available to be used as turning opportunity, not turning circle in that sense. Opposite and just down the hill a little bit, and they clearly were not parking spaces because next to them there was access into driveways and things. So there's a contrast between that and the area we're interested in. So there weren't any any concerns that kind of arose from my point of view when I saw the site. I'm conscious that I only saw it once on one day. Mr. Ingalls, you say that your general sense is this is not a busy street; it's a cul-de-sac, and that's consistent with my experience on the site visit. As I say, I was only there literally one day, so I don't know how necessarily representative that is, but I don't know if either Mr. Ingalls or Mr. Coburn want to say anything about anything about the general level of busyness. It doesn't appear to me to be a busy part of.
I could perhaps comment on that first. I mean, yes, Mrs. Coburn has obviously got more experience than me in terms of living there, but I think, it goes without saying it's at the end of a cul-de-sac. So because it's at the end of a cul-de-sac, that's the most lightly traffic part of a cul-de-sac, so very lightly traffic. It also means that there's very low traffic speeds because it's at the end of the road as well. The turning area that's there, even with two cars parked at the end of the road, it'll still be a full-size turning area for emergency vehicles, etc. And vehicles using these parking spaces, they can reverse to the turning area to come out, or alternatively, because you've got such a wide road, because you've not just got the carriageway, but you've also got the footways because the curbs are dropped, so that you can simply reverse out of the parking space, turning towards the footway on one side and then away in forward gear. I think one thing that had been mentioned was how if it might be difficult to access the driveway for number 18, the house at the end of the road on the left. But it's fairly straightforward to go in there in forward gear. If the owner is determined to go in reverse gear, then you would have to swing over to the right hand side of the road and then reverse in. I think in terms of how well used the parking is. We'll come to that later because I think that's one of the items, item 7, I think it is. How well used parking is. But since we got involved through the planning process, I've looked at the site on 8 separate occasions, at all different times of day, weekends, evenings, all sorts of things, just to get a full record of how well used not only these 3 spaces are, but also the 4 spaces that are only 100 metres away, so that how well used both these sets of parking spaces are. So we can come to that point later on. I think that the only other thing that's maybe quite important as well is that when this site was first debated through an application in 2005, the initial drawings actually showed parking spaces in the westerly leg of the turning area. In other words, where these 2 spaces would be if this stopping up order goes ahead. That there was spaces shown there at one time and not challenged by ourselves. But the developer decided that rather than do that, they wanted to put the parking spaces in the southerly leg of the turning area. And then later on, in terms of amendments to house types and so on, that was eventually changed to 3 spaces in the location where they are at present.
At present, yeah.
But I think one of the reasons that perhaps the spaces didn't go at the westerly end of the road, which is where they would be marked out now. One reason perhaps why they didn't go there is that there was a field access back in 2008. If you're going to Google Street View from September 2008, you can see a field access off the end of the road. Right. So that would have made it difficult to have spaces at that end of the turning area, whereas now that field access is gone.
No, that's very useful because I did slightly wonder about that. When I had a look at the site and I had a look at the end there to see whether there was greater capacity to have a turning circle, a genuine turning circle. It certainly didn't look to me as if there was enough room, but it sounds as if when the houses were originally in consideration, then if there was a possibility of field access, and thinking back to the site visit, I can see why that might be the case, but that's clearly not the case now. It doesn't look as if there's any prospect of that. No, that's very helpful. So, Scober, is there anything you wanted to say just on this issue or what you've heard from Mr. Ingalls?
No, I agree with everything. I mean, I can't see a problem whatsoever with replacing the parking to where it was originally meant to go, because that was on the original plans. Looking back at the time, so issues have came. We took that on board, and we are going to replace spaces if it was to go ahead. And there is a big turning bay, and as they say, that are a car parking, so we're not taking anything away from the street that we're not replacing.
Yeah. It certainly seems to me that this is very much parking space. It's not a turning circle. There's the official turning circle, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I think they're trying to say it was for turning, but it's not a turning. It's not a turning place anyway. So if there was cars parked in it, like they're saying there is, which there's not, they wouldn't be able to turn in it anyway.
No,
so, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. What I can see, the objections don't really make sense to me, but that's the situation.
That's useful. Thank you for that. And I know that consultation with the emergency services is not something that's required under the planning process, and it looks a bit unlikely that emergency services will have a view in relation to this. But I wondered if Mr. Kirk, could you confirm whether the emergency services, whether either specifically or as part of Scottish Board of Council general practice, you'd consult with the emergency services when you're stopping up a road?
I have to say that we don't. Certainly, in my experience, we haven't done. But again, it's public intimated about how closely the emergency services will scrutinise these sort of notices. I don't really know. But yes, whilst we did intimate that to the undertaker, it isn't part of our process, and maybe that's something we need to take on board.
Maybe we'll talk about something. It sounds unlikely in the current circumstances because if an ambulance fire engine or police car arrive, they'll just park in the middle of the road and do what they have to do. But I'm conscious in other circumstances where it's the genuine stopping up of an actual road. I have done a previous stopping up order that there was a concern that an ambulance couldn't get to an elderly person's house if a road was stopped up. And therefore I asked the council, they are concerned, if they could make sure that they tell the emergency services, but it doesn't look as if we're in like that sort of territory.
No, I mean,
Mr.
Ingalls is looking as
Mr.
he wants to come in, but I think, I mean, obviously the objector raised that, and we looked at the objections, and I think if we thought that was a real concern, then we would have contacted the emergency services and sought their views on it. But I mean, they will have their own powers anyway, where they're able to do what they need to do.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Ingalls?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when we're looking at planning up any planning application, we take everything into account, and we'll always consider emergency services. And if we thought there was an issue with emergency services, we would have raised that or consulted with the emergency services. But the two replacement spaces at the end of the road are out with the turning area in any event. So you have a full-size turning area that, from all my experience of the road, is always clear of vehicles.
Okay, thank you. No, that's helpful. That's helpful. From that perspective, that's all fine. Impact number 18, well, I think we've got the information that we have, and it's been spoken about already this morning. Mr. Stoddart isn't able to attend the call this morning. There were two objectors who had raised questions about the interrelationship with the Road Scotland Act powers, which is part of the reason why I was asking Mr. Ingalls as to whether his roots are in roads or in planning. I'm going to give Mr. Kirk an opportunity to comment on that if he wants to. I mean, I've understood the point, but there's no one here really to argue that point. Obviously, there's powers under Section 207. There's powers, I think, in Section 68 of the Road Scotland Act, where Scottish Borders Council, exercising functions as local roads authority, could stop up a road. But obviously, those are not the functions that are being exercised in this particular case. But I don't know, Mr. Kirk, is there anything you want to say on that particular angle?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, our practice would be that if a road became unnecessary, then we would utilise the powers in terms of Section 68 of the Road Scotland Act. But our practice has always been if there's a planning permission is granted that a road or part of a road needs to be stopped up, then our practice would be to use the Town and Country Planning Act. And in this instance, obviously snowballed from the planning permission which had been granted, and I don't think we would have deemed the parking spaces to be unnecessary. But the planning condition that came through was that replacement spaces need to be made available, and obviously the parking spaces are the development site or part of the development site. So it's not so much that the road became unnecessary. It's that they need to be stopped up to allow the development to take place, which is why we went down the Town Country Planning, which is our practice.
And insofar as there is a crossover on the kind of functional aspects of the tests, one of the aspects in the Road Scotland Act is whether an alternative is either available or needed. And in this context, I guess the question is the alternative needed? Is there need to replace the alternative? And the council's clear position is no.
Well, that's right, but there will be alternative spaces provided as one of the
Even going down from 3 to 2 is acceptable, in other words.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, if it had been done under the Road Scotland Act, then the stopping up would have come into place when there was a suitable alternative arrangement. And the suitable alternative arrangement is the 2 parking spaces being marked out at the end of the road.
Thank you. That's very clear. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 7 was about impacts on driver behaviours, parking, including visitor parking. We've kind of touched on that a little bit, but Mr. Ingalls, is there more that you wanted to say? Then Mrs. Corbett might want to say a bit more as well. But starting off, Mr. Ingalls, I think I've got your points generally about the kind of the frequency of usage and the like. But
yeah, I'd like to say a wee bit more on that. Because because parking was such an issue, I've done quite a lot of inspections of the parking. So just to go over, on 8 occasions in months of June and July, I've visited the site and I've done that at all different times of the day. I can go into these dates and times if you want, but in simple terms, I've been there, weekends, evenings, during the day. So I've been there on 8 different occasions. I looked at the 3 parking spaces and also looked at the usage of the 4 parking spaces, which are only 100 metres away. So in terms of the 3 spaces, on 6 occasions, there were no cars in the 3 spaces at all. And on 2 occasions, there was 1 car in the 3 spaces. So we're looking at that mathematically. What that basically means that on 75% of the time, there was no cars, and 25% of the time, there was 1 car. Also, what's really important is that the 4 spaces further along the road, which are only 100 metres away, looking at them, on 4 of the occasions that I visited the site, there was 1 car, and on the other 4 occasions, there was no cars. So in other words, 50% of the time there was 1 car in the 4 spaces, and 50% of the time there was none. So I think that what that demonstrates quite clearly is that not only the 3 spaces in question, but the 4 spaces 100 metres along the road are very lightly used.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Coburn, is there anything you wanted to say either generally on this or in response of what you just heard from Mr. Ingalls?
I agree entirely with that. And part of that, when I was putting evidence in for the planning, I took photos daily for weeks and submitted them to prove that the point that the only time that cars ever really went in is when the neighbours parked their own cars in there to make a point. Very rarely is there other cars parked to that. I mean, we've got the evidence. That's all I've got to add. I feel like there is plenty of other spaces. I don't think we're taking away anything that that's been used and that won't be able to get used in the other 2 spaces provided.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ingalls?
Yeah, the final thing, I've got Google Street View in front of me just to remind myself exactly what the site's like and so on. And there's 3 different dates on Google Street View, and if you go on any of the 3 dates, there's no car parked in the space.
Yes, that's it. Okay. Yes, no, then 3 dates. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I didn't have any matters that arose from the site visit that I've not mentioned already today. As I say, I thought it was very useful for me to have seen the site, and I've no particular intentions to go back and visit them, visit the site there because of any issues arising from this call. So as I say, in the absence of anybody else being here to make their own representation, I don't think there's anything I need particularly from anybody else. I'm just checking my own notes here to make sure I've asked all the questions I'm proposing to ask and to put. That all seems to be fine. As I say, I'm not looking for anything in closing by anybody, because I think that's where the issues I think are reasonably clear. But basically, the hearing today really closes the last stage of the evidence gathering. There'll be no opportunities now for parties either in support or objecting to make any further representations. And my role now is to write a report and submit that to ministers. And for Mrs. Coburn's benefit, the nature of that process is my job title is as a reporter, which means I report. There are some cases where a reporter is delegated to make the decision, as Claire Milne had when dealing with the original planning appeal. So her decision was her decision. In this case, I'm required to report to ministers, so I'll write a report, and then the relevant planning minister, I think Andrew Key, will be advised by his officials and then make a decision on whether to confirm or to refuse to confirm the order. But I'll press on and do that just now. I've got a bit of space for drafting in my diary ahead, and so I will proceed on that basis. And unless there's anything else anybody wants to raise at this stage, that certainly be useful from my point of view, just to get a sense of in more detail as to what the issues and concerns are. I'm not seeing anybody raising hands just now, so I'll just thank you for your participation today and give you a bit of your day left that you might not have expected. So I'm grateful for that, and I'll formally bring the hearing to a close just now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.